Chances are if you're watching a video about why everything feels pointless, then you've probably checked out as well. For the past several months, this video has been so hard to make because there's a constant outrage cycle going on every day. It was very hard for me to get up and make a video about hope when I myself felt hopeless. But that's precisely why I am here still today to make this video. Not just to tell you about why things are hopeless, but to give people actionable takeaways that we can use to better ourselves and the world surrounding us. So of course, in this video, I will be outlining 3 levels of concrete engagement that you can participate in to rebuild your sense of agency in a world that I understand often feels out of control. And as you see in the thumbnail, I'll be using a few content creators as reference points to help us understand why everything is so pointless. I'll be using Drew Gooden to help us cover the systems that have brought us to this point, FD Signifier to help us explore the culture surrounding disengagement. We'll be covering how HRAC highlights the economic conditions that we all now share together. And last but not least, John Green will help us reframe the despair we feel every day into something more actionable and meaningful. So let's first start with Drew Gooden and his take on billionaire greed, which is going to be a good lens into understanding why everything feels so pointless and where we might begin to change it. Now, chances are you may have seen the video, but I'm going to assume you haven't, because the thing about this video, which I do highly recommend you watch after, is that it does a very good job of naming the problem. Greed is no longer just an isolated incident between a few rich people, but something that everyone who is in power is seeking to grab for themselves. It feels systemic, it feels optimized, it feels automated. Billionaires no longer just hoard wealth, but they quite literally financialize every single aspect of our lives as a consumer, and we as the people feel like we can do nothing about it. Because it really helps establish, and what Drew Gooden does very well in his own signature style, of course, is satirically but also very poignantly detail how billionaires really are just taking over everything. The thing about a video like Drew Gooden's is that I feel so much more informed coming out of it. I feel validated, feeling angry and tired at the whole world for feeling like it's causing me the distress I feel today. I feel less crazy for noticing that I am not the only one who realizes that it can't just be me. But I think the biggest failing, not just on this video, but what a lot of other content does when they name the problem and share with everyone the news of why things are bad, is I do not know what I'm supposed to do with this information. I'm making this video because I wish other people made videos like this, because I need to know, so what? So the billionaires hoard everything, and clearly we need to tax the rich at least a little bit more. So how are we going to get there? What are we going to do? And so that's what I really wanted to get into next, because the discourse around this whole politics is really what's so frightening and troubling. Knowledge without direction creates despair. And the problem is that when we know what the problem is and do nothing about it, the only people that are left to actually create the change to make happen are the people who are already in power. Because when we as normal people decide to not do anything with this information, then it effectively means that it doesn't matter what we learn about. Once you develop that energy where you do feel frustrated, you have nowhere to put that energy besides ultimately just feeling nihilistic out of it all. And that's the next point I really wanted to cover, because more often than not, nihilism is the point. In a video by FD Signifier, it was a video about Charlie Kirk and the conservative death cult. And a video of that rhetoric in the title, it's hard not to feel like it's just going to be another sensationalized piece of media that's meant to just cater to my echo chamber. However, despite all my hesitancies, I still decided to watch it, and it was very interesting and enlightening me about this next point. And it is that the debate around this conversation about politics and what we should do about this change is just so absurd and also equally meaningless. For a person like you and me, where I assume that you're not actively engaging in this discourse, but rather just spectating it. Because again, most of us are just lurkers on the internet, while a small minority actually participates in it. When you see those surrounded videos by Jubilee and other kinds of slop debate media that tends to destroy the next conservative or liberal, no matter what it is, all it does is just fan the flames of outrage even more. It bothers me so much. And ultimately, I still feel like nothing has changed. It's not like the debate of the opposing party that has no intentions of having a good faith argument is going to reasonably move the needle in our culture towards anything substantial that will lead to the real change. And feeling this greater sense of nihilism over engaging this slop content is that when I watched FD Signifier's video, it all suddenly clicked that that was the whole point of the video. It was not meant to ever persuade you with the one side's facts or logic, but it was meant to drain all the energy out of you. The dehumanizing context of these conversations further to not only just, of course, put us in our echo chambers like we already know, but to also just make us disengage entirely. Because if people who may be well-spoken, either on the left or right or whatever side side you're on can still make a reasonably well put point and yet still have many people disagree with that wholeheartedly and deny the very logic of those statements, it's hard to feel like you can even make sense of the world at all. I don't think it is a secret that algorithms are designed to not facilitate the good faith participation, but the bad faith participation, because the algorithms know that you're going to be engaged more and feeding into that slop so that you can feel justified about your feelings, while also unfortunately feeling like the other side is worth of the ridicule, and thus nothing ever changes. And when you feel that nothing ever changes, you start to withdraw, which is something that I realized I started feeling as I engaged with more of that content. I really started to stop caring the more I watched these videos, because I'm like, well, that was a good point, but what are we going to do about that? So of course this feeds into this whole narrative about not only just the constant scandals that occur in our day-to-day politics, the constant extraction of all of our wealth from the billionaires up top, the constant moral debate about the most pointless things sometimes that never get anywhere. All of the constant stream of outrage and all of this media is meant to ultimately just put us down and not let us engage with the system. When there's so many things at once, we fail to take in any of it at all. A Voidzilla video that really covers the topic of how people are abusing the presidential pardon over and over again only to make the same mistakes. He himself puts it that it is not normal in any part of history to be pardoned so many times, and to realize that as long as you have enough money and enough influence with the right people in power, you yourself can commit any crime you want, and that crime is only just a price tag and not a failure of your own actions. Why CoffeeZilla made that video and why I make this video today is to help you realize that this isn't normal, that all this is not normal, and that we should not be disengaged, because it is important that we say something about it. When there is enough outrage that we begin to stop covering it, people will also stop asking the question of what do we do to fix this, and people start instead just feeling why even bother. Once I finished watching this video, I realized that nihilism is not a neutral state that we're in. Nihilism is quite literally the most perfect outcome that people in power need, because it keeps everything in place where they already want it to be. A public that argues endlessly but acts rarely is one that's easy to ignore, and that's something that I feel like we all really need to remember. But all these conversations about the debates surrounding government and economics and politics fail to do is bring it back around to ultimately the working person, the average Joe. Because there's going to be people like you and me who, and we are average Joes for consuming content like this, but there are far more people out there who are simply just living their day-to-day lives. Think about your coworkers, your bosses, the people who are naturally around your day-to-day life, about how they most likely don't consume any of this content at all, but they all still do ultimately feel the same material outrage that we do, that our grocery prices are so high, that when we spend $15 on just a meal, that it feels like we're being financially irresponsible, when ultimately at the end of the day we are no closer to buying a home when we do decide to just spoil ourselves with one decent meal. If there is one thing that we all have in common that really ties together class consciousness in 2026, it is the economic squeeze that we all feel every day. And that's where I lean into my next point regarding Atrioc, and how this whole point is that short-term thinking has become rational. No matter who you talk to, we will all at least witness at some point in our lives people who are subscribed to too many subscriptions, people who are engaging in so many forms of debt, ranging from paycheck advances all the way down to your Klarnas and your Afterpays, where you simply just decide to buy that $400 couch in 4 monthly installments, while these companies are preying on the fact that you will miss a payment, so it tanks your credit score, brings you on a cycle of debt, and exactly preys on those same kind of people who won't just do it once, but will do it over and over again until they dig themselves a debt pile hole that they cannot dig themselves back out of. What I found most interesting regarding Atrioc, that in particular in his interview with Gavin Newsom, Atrioc really always does a great job of bringing the conversation back to people about how nihilism is truly the thing that's breaking Gen Z, but also everyone. When we have no vision of the future, when we have no hopes of buying a house or starting a family because we know it's too expensive, it seeps into our everyday lives. You can spend thousands and thousands of dollars on student loans that you probably aren't going to make, because college-educated men and non-college educated men are at the same employment level nowadays, which is to say high levels of unemployment. It's absurd, really to really take in all this information that no matter who or what you talk to, you will find someone who's in a lot of debt. You will find someone who is in between jobs. You will find someone that does have a job and does have a career, but still has no forward-thinking ambition. Just because it is so hard to focus on what will happen in 10 years from now, that we can only focus on the stuff that's happening right now. Friendships will go away as our time disappears into work because we have to take on a second job so that we can just simply have extra money so that we can afford something decent for ourselves or to save up for the rainy day that will still come. When at the end of the day, when you see a graph like how consumer debt is an all-time high, there are going to be so many graphs and economic indicators telling you about how bad the economy is while stock markets continue to be an all-time high. If there's any graph you need to look at to remind you of how everyone, not just you, is feeling this squeeze, it is the fact that everyone is borrowing from their future to just take care of themselves today. Consumer debt would not need to be an all-time high if we had proper enough wages and a high enough standard of living that we can all reasonably live with where we are comfortably at. But of course, we can't. Class consciousness, which I understand is a very politicized term, is fundamentally when we all recognize that, yes, one person not being able to pay the rent, that's their issue. But millions of people not being able to get by, that is not the issue of each and every individual one of these people, but because of the system at hand, something much bigger and greater than that. And that's ultimately why we feel hopeless, but that's also precisely why we can use and channel that energy to make something out of it. So let's tie it all together in a nice little bow about what engagement actually looks like. And that's why the last and fourth face you will see on my thumbnail is about John Green, about how hope is not just a feeling, but a decision. And I wanted to first bring this up because I want people to realize that when I mention hope, it feels like a very naive feeling. Hope is something that you feel like the main character in a TV show uses to defeat the main bad villain. And ultimately, the narrative around hope is one that's built off of naivety and false optimism. And that's not what it is at all. Because at the end of the day, it can start to feel like we're all pessimistic, but what hope really truly is the decision knowing that, yes, things are fucked up, but I am still here anyways despite it all. We are all here today because we ultimately want better lives for ourselves. And if we think that by consuming more content that we are somehow achieving the better lives for ourselves, then that is a false promise that I myself have been deluding into for a long time. Hope is not optimism. Just like love, which is what John Green explains in his video, love is not the butterflies in the stomach feeling you get when you develop a crush, and love is not the honeymoon phase that you eventually have when you meet someone that you really connect with. Love is also a decision you make when you have spent several years with this person and you disagree on a lot of things. You have to compromise on a lot of things. And even in times where you may not feel that love, you choose to stay with that person anyways, because that is also what love is, and it's a decision. And just like love, hope is very much a decision. We can every day feel some semblance of hope when there is good things coming out, but hope is a sustained engagement, one that we should strive our best to be as consistent as possible in. Hope is going to be something that I have very little of on a day-to-day basis, but the everlasting hope that I need to have is that I get up and every day make some slight piece of progress towards making another video to remind others that all hope is not lost. Now that we established why everything feels so pointless, the question we should now be asking ourselves is not what is still broken, but what can we do about it? We've already established that disengagement itself feels safe because it guarantees no change. So I don't think I need to convince anyone that we need to care. We just need to convince enough people such as yourself that caring is not something we have to do alone, which is why I wanted to give you 3 levels of engagement that we can all participate in at 3 different level of paces you yourself can engage in to avoid burnout in the midst of a world where it's easy to just not care. Level 1 is unorganized engagement, and these are the actions you can perform right now on your own without permission or without joining a particular organization or without waiting for the right moment to do anything. And while some of these may sound small, they're certainly not meaningless because they serve not as a way to change the world, but more so as practice. Because level 1 is about reclaiming your agency. Because especially when the world feels very overwhelming, very corrupt, and hostile to any form of effort, the first thing you lose is not really hope, but the belief that your actions can actually do anything at all, which is why we need level 1 to help us reclaim that sense of agency back, to help us realize that we can show up and it does matter. And there's 3 different ways that this engagement can show. The first part is emotional engagement, and this part is really about honest conversation and really just talking to the people in your life, and more importantly about the things that matter to them. You're listening with not the goal to say something back or to win a debate or to make a point. It's ultimately about choosing good faith conversation over the ironic detachment that we often have in the internet. Instead of making memes or satirical humor about how bad everything is and how absurd it all is, by honestly and vulnerably opening up to people around you, do you realize that most people aren't stupid or evil, that we all come from the same place of feeling overwhelmed, that we're tired, and we're ultimately just trying to survive? That alone can radically change how isolated you feel. And the next part that can really change how you feel is by being engaged locally. And especially when it comes to local engagement, you start to really feel like you're not alone. This comes and shows up in different parts of your life, but what matters is ultimately just being present with where you are. Whether it is your neighborhood, your workplace, or even the online communities that you're a part of. The whole premise of this idea is that you're meaningfully applying yourself to the people around you. So sure, it may not seem like you're doing a whole lot by picking up the litter in your neighborhood, or by going to a local barbecue, or even going to a work-sponsored event with your coworkers, or even just being a part of the Discord community you're in instead of being a lurker. All of these things, again, prove to yourself more than anyone that you are a part of the community and what you do can actually make a difference. It's important that you stay engaged with your local community because it means you're present and that you show up. And the lack of showing up, which is self-isolation, really starts to take into effect when you stay more and more online and more specifically on your phone, doom scrolling, and not engaging with real people. And of course, that's why the third point is being more intentional with what you consume. When you're tired from work and you're tired of people and you want to be on your own, the last thing I want you to do is to continue to unintentionally doom scroll and consume more of the outrage that will only make you feel more hopeless. By at least giving yourself more deliberate rest and engaging with media more deliberately, it's just about doing the things that really do truly matter to you. It means also intentionally learning about what's happening with the world if you can't help but ignore what's going on. Level 1, again, to recap, is about being intentional with the people around you in your own life. It's not going to fix corruption, war, or inequality, and pretending it will only make people more cynical. Level 1 is where you start off with reclaiming your own personal agency, and I don't want to stretch it any further than it needs to be. Level 1 helps change your relationship to these problems from paralysis to actual participation. Once you start reclaiming this agency, you transition then into level 2, where you realize you truly are not alone and that this fight is a lot bigger than the one that you're oftentimes battling in your own head. Where level 1 is about saying that you matter and that the actions you dictate in your own life truly do affect those around you, level 2 is now about the collective you are now a part of. Level 2 is informal organizing, where your individual frustration turns into a shared sense of action. Level 2 is when you start realizing that the people around you are indeed experiencing the same pressure, the same instability, and the same exhaustion. Level 2 shows up in more meaningful actions by showing up in city council meetings, attending a protest, or volunteering with people you've never met before and seeing immediate tangible impact. When you go volunteer for a local organization like Habitat for Humanity, you can see the difference you make. When you attend a protest, it's not just yourself, but thousands or perhaps even millions of other people that share the same beliefs as you do, so much so that we're willing to step outside the comfort zone of our work or our day-to-day lives to all collectively make a difference and make a stand in what we have to say. Showing up to a city council meeting, for example, is another unstructured way of you making a difference. When you show up with a group of people to a city council meeting, you make your opinions known and you make your stances to local government officials and state what is important to you and the people surrounding you. What matters here isn't the scale of your work, but it's now the visibility that you have and the differences that you actually do make in your community. Seeing other people show up does something powerful to the brain, and it really does break the illusion that you're alone. It helps you validate your instincts, and it lowers the emotional barrier for the next person to participate. Most social change that has ever existed doesn't ever start with mass movements. It starts with the small groups and small sections all across the country and the world that all want to start doing something at the same time collectively. It all really boils down to the fact that we do not have to face things by ourselves individually anymore. If you feel like you've already reclaimed your agency and you're ready to take on something like level 2, in the description below I've linked a few tools that will help you find local protests, volunteer opportunities, and civic events in your area if you do feel like you're ready for the challenge and the next step to participate in the local area around you. One particular resource I really want to shout out is called the Rutgers Democracy Lab. This website in particular explains how to actually find and attend city council meetings and how public participation actually works. If by this point, however, you still feel like you really truly want to make a real difference, then level 3 is where you're going to find yourself at. And level 3 is where the real structured organizing begins. Because you realize that you don't want to just show up occasionally and show up when you can. You want to show up consistently and see the real work show up in our politics and our day-to-day lives. And I really also want to emphasize that level 3 is not about becoming a revolutionary. I feel like you have to sacrifice your whole life into the cause. Level 3 is simply just plugging into the existing structures that already know how to fight. power. Organizations exist because real change requires infrastructure. Organizations already exist to track officials, coordinate pressure, and sustain effort when your individual motivation runs out. Because in level 3, you're not alone anymore. And in fact, you're not just part of a greater collective, but your skills actively will move the needle in our overall world. So when it comes to the different ways you can actually formally participate in an organization, it shows up in your writing, your research, the outreach that you can do. By showing up consistently and oftentimes making it your full-time job, you're able to make a difference and show up in the ways that these organizations want you to. While you can already guess what my political beliefs are, I really want to make my recommendations very non-partisan. I want you as an audience to know that regardless of how different your beliefs may be from mine, that you can still actively participate in what's important to you. Which is why in the description below, I've linked a few platforms and links that can help you find organization groups where you can find how your skills can contribute to those causes. Level 3 isn't for everyone, and it really doesn't have to be, but it exists because systems don't change themselves, because level 3 says that your skills matter. So I'll say this in closing. I feel the same squeeze that all of you guys feel every day. Just like you, I work the same 40 hours you do, and I have the same 24 hours a day to often spend trying to make do with what I have in this world. Ultimately, I do want to show you guys what engagement looks like. So if you want to see more videos from me about what engagement truly does look like, please do leave your comments down below to show your support and to show that what I do matters. For now though, if you're anything like me, level 1 is where you're going to remain and so will I for a very long time. Everything starts by taking your life back into your own hands and realizing that you can make a difference. Back when slavery was treated as normal, Frederick Douglass once said that power does not concede without a demand. In a system that already benefits from your apathy, showing up at any level is already an act of defiance. I want you to say no to staying silent, and I want you to say no to disappearing into nihilism. I want you to say no to disengaging and not doing anything at all. I'll say this many times more in the future, and I've already said it many times now. But hope isn't just a feeling you have, it is something you practice.